The spirit of innovation is deeply ingrained in America, and Google is helping Americans innovate in ways both big and small. The Air Force Research Laboratory is partnering with Google Cloud using AI to accelerate defense research for air, space, and cyberspace forces. This is a new era of American innovation. Find out more at g.co/American innovation.
Kick off summer with Memorial Day savings at Lowe's. Right now, get 5 Scott's Naturescapes 1.5 cubic foot mulch bags for just $10. Plus, get up to 40% off select major appliances and save an extra $50 on every $500 you spend on select major appliances $396 or more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 5/28. Mulch offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.
Last week, the New York Times published an op-ed with a remarkably star-studded byline. Its authors were the Secretary of Health and Human Services, RFK, the head of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, that's Dr. Oz, the HUD Secretary, the Secretary of Agriculture. These 4 were all united behind a single headline: if you want welfare and can work, you must. I sort of wonder if that title was engineered in a lab to make you cringe.
Yeah, I mean, it's problematic in a lot of ways.
Leo Cuello is a lawyer who works in public policy, mostly healthcare. What drove him nuts about this op-ed is that it makes the case for work requirements for Medicaid recipients by leaning on a history that he says is just plain wrong. Leo gets why the GOP might be leaning on faulty data. Republicans want to cut $880 billion from the budget with the big, beautiful reconciliation bill they're steering through Congress. But they just can't do that without cuts to Medicaid. And in the end, that is what a work requirement for healthcare is.
The work requirement is the biggest cut in their current reconciliation bill. It gets them just over $300 billion, right? So this is about money.
Before I go much further, allow me to explain what I meant by faulty data. The heart of the Republican argument in favor of work requirements for Medicaid goes like this: we have tried it before, and it worked. That's because back in the 1990s, President Bill Clinton made cash welfare dependent on getting a job or job training. But Leo says it's worth recalling that in the midst of all that reform, Congress took specific actions to protect healthcare.
What happened in the 1990s is that Congress looked at healthcare. It looked at the Medicaid program, and it said, you know what? We have been expanding this program to more and more populations, and this is no longer welfare. It's totally different than our cash assistance program. Cash assistance and healthcare used to be linked. In the 1990s, they de-linked them precisely because they were coming to the conclusion that healthcare is really not like a welfare program anymore. We're just going to put healthcare on a totally different track. That's actually what happened in the 1990s.
Now, these 2 tracks, they are on something of a collision course. But did linking welfare to work in the 90s, the way Bill Clinton did it even have good results?
No, it didn't. We've seen the same thing on the healthcare side where they have done the work requirement. It has not led to more employment. It has led to people losing their health insurance.
Today on the show, it was not that long ago that most politicians thought work requirements for healthcare were a terrible idea. So why is Congress moving ahead with them anyway? I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today? Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices, and that's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies, so you can save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states and situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
It turns out Donald Trump's allies have been working towards a Medicaid work requirement for years now. It actually started back in the president's first term in 2018. But back then, it was an experiment.
The Trump administration today announced it will now open the door for states to impose work requirements for recipients of Medicaid.
The Department of Health and Human Services essentially told the states if they wanted to put in place work requirements for Medicaid recipients, the feds weren't going to fight them over it. States could ask for something called a waiver.
A small set of states ran forward with the idea and got approvals from the Trump administration to try and work to implement the work requirement. That's when the lawsuits started happening because they were abusing their limited authority to do a pilot program by trying to do this gigantic work requirement through the pilot program.
So the argument was it's not a pilot program if you're doing it across the whole state?
No, the argument was centered around the fact that this pilot authority has to promote the objectives of Medicaid under the law, which is under the law to help furnish health care. And in Kentucky, for example, they were proposing a work requirement that was going to take away health insurance from 100,000 people. So it just clearly did not match the legal authority for doing a pilot program. And then when the court looked at it, they looked at all of the evidence on the impacts of it, and they said this thing is going to be really damaging, and the state doesn't have the authority to do this.
Some states did manage to put work requirements in place, right? Can you tell me what happened when they moved forward?
Sure. So of all the states where they tried during the first Trump administration, litigation shut down all of them before the work requirements could sort of take off. You know, like the airplane never got off the runway. The only state that did get their airplane off the runway was Arkansas. Arkansas was able to get their work requirement going for 4 months before that litigation also got to the point where the litigation stopped the work requirement. They terminated 18,000 people's health insurance in that short window of time. That was something like a quarter of the people that were in the mix.
Was that because people weren't working?
No. That number is ridiculously high, and it's far more than the number of people who weren't working or without a disability. So we know that in Arkansas, they terminated the health insurance of many workers, of many people with disabilities. It simply didn't work, and there were some really tragic stories that happened in Arkansas.
Yeah, I know that the National Health Law Program sued. You were a part of that. Can you tell me about the case you made and who you represented?
One of the gentlemen who was one of the plaintiffs, his name was Adrian McGonigal. He was about 40 years old when this litigation was starting. And what happened to him is that he had a serious lung condition, COPD, for which he was taking life-sustaining medications. He was working in a chicken plant in Arkansas despite this huge health problem. When Arkansas starts up their work requirement, he tries to do the reporting. He may have initially succeeded, but then one day he goes to the pharmacy and he can't get his medication filled, and he needs this medication to be able to breathe normally. And they tell him, hey, you got cut off. You don't have health insurance anymore. So he's desperately out going to pharmacies. He ends up in the ER, racking up bills. He eventually starts dropping shifts, right, because he can't breathe normally. Then he loses his job. So he's under incredible stress. His doctors had told him, without medications, you're doing permanent damage to your health. It turns out, even though he was working, he tried to report. Something went wrong, as it does every time they do this. He gets cut off, and he gets sent on this downward spiral. Adrian died last year, age 46. I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you if his death was in any way tied to what he went through, but I can tell you the work requirement made the last years of his life hell. It permanently damaged his health. And, I can't imagine what it was like for him, unemployed, not able to breathe well, and hearing Republican leaders in the state saying the exact same things we're hearing from the House GOP today. That work requirement took away his health insurance, his health, then his job, and maybe his life. That's what it looks like in reality.
And that was just with 4 months of work requirements.
The work requirement was in place for 4 months, and that's what it was able to do to him.
Yeah. So is Georgia the only state now with Medicaid work requirements?
It is the only state with a work requirement in place. Only 2 have ever happened. The Arkansas one and now this Georgia one. New Hampshire and Michigan got very close. They were about to start their work requirements. And New Hampshire looked at, okay, we have to start terminating people. And they looked at the list of who's going to get terminated. And they were just basically like, oh, this hasn't worked. We are terminating way, way, way too many people. There are clearly workers here. There are clearly parents here. There are clearly people with disabilities. We can't do this. And they just stopped.
So if I'm in the GOP, I guess Georgia is my model for how a work requirement might play out because it's gone on longer than Arkansas and it's been able to continue. How are work requirements playing out in Georgia? Like, how is it working for people who need insurance?
It's working really terribly in Georgia. It is, I have described it as a spectacular failure. The Georgia expansion, the way they've designed it, should have about 250,000 people in it, maybe more. They have enrolled 7,000 people in that Georgia program.
That's a pittance.
Yeah, they have a 3% success rate, right? It's comically low. It's tragicomically low.
And is that just because people don't want to go through the hoops to apply? Or when they apply, they're being rejected?
It's because it's so hard to get through the work requirement reporting process. And you can see the difference because we have this incredible natural experiment where North Carolina, similar size state to Georgia, started a clean Medicaid expansion 1 month after Georgia. So Georgia had a head start in this race. And North Carolina has no work requirement, so there are no hurdles. And they have 600,000 people enrolled over 600,000 people enrolled in their Medicaid expansion.
Yeah, I mean, I've been especially interested to read about Luke Seaborn, who's a guy from rural Georgia who kind of became the face of Medicaid expansion in Georgia. Like he had called his insurer to thank them for covering a surgery. And they said, hey, would you do an ad essentially for Brian Kemp, the governor, and explain why this expansion is so great and the work requirement is okay? And he said, sure.
Pathways is a great program that offers insurance to low income and working professionals such as myself, and that's what I was. I was looking for insurance, low-income insurance, to help my son and I out because we didn't have insurance. I highly recommend it.
But then in the months since, it seems like he's really soured on the program. Is it worth telling his story?
It really is, because it is exactly what this program is Luke Seaborn's experience. So this same guy who spoke out for the state, he got his insurance terminated. He then contacts the state, says, hey, what's going on? And the state sort of wipes the egg off their face and gets him re-enrolled because, of course, he's their poster boy. And then guess what? He gets terminated again. In 9 months, he lost his health insurance twice.
And this is because there are all these requirements, you've got to keep proving you're working again and again. It's not like a once a year thing. It's a every month thing.
So that depends on the state and how they design it. Georgia has him, requesting on a monthly basis, having to document on a monthly basis. So in his case, it's not because he wasn't working. This guy is a worker. It's just those government red tape reporting problems. And I think people need to understand that the House Republicans know this. They know the terminations are going to happen. And that's okay with them because it saves money.
I was going to say that's the cost savings. Like, there's sort of an inherent tension built in here, which is like, we're offering you health insurance, but the way we're going to save money is by you not having the health insurance. And so by putting the work requirement forward, you have to say that. You have to underline that. Like, this is the cost savings, fewer people with health insurance.
Right. It saves money because it fails.
We'll be right back after a quick break. This episode is brought to you by Discover. It's smart to always have a few financial goals. And here's a really smart one you can set: earning cash back on what you buy every day. With Discover, you can. Get this. Discover automatically matches all the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year. Seriously, all of it. Discover trusts you to make smart decisions. After all, you listen to this podcast. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
You may get a little excited when you shop at Burlington.
What a low price! You see that? They have my favorite brand! It's like a whole new Burlington! I can buy two!
I'm saving so much!
Burlington saves you up to 60% off other retailers' prices every day. Will it be the low prices or the great brands? Burlington. Deals? Brands? Wow! I told you so. Styles and selections vary by store.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Not everyone is careful with your personal information, which might explain why there's a victim of identity theft every 5 seconds in the U.S. Fortunately, there's LifeLock. LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats to your identity. If your identity is stolen, a U.S.-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year by visiting lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
You know, your center did do a report about some people who do seem to be making money in Georgia, even though this health insurance program is set up to save money. So who are the people benefiting from these work requirements?
Yeah, one of the other really absurd things about these work requirements is that for the state to actually be able to do the work requirement, the state has to put up this whole bureaucracy. They have to set up the ability to collect information about people, change the state's eligibility systems, right, to be able to track who's working, who's not working, and send out termination notices to people who are not working and follow up with people who say they're working and have submitted paperwork. And so that actually requires the state making a lot of changes to its state eligibility systems. In Kentucky alone, the state has said that was going to cost them $270 million. In the reconciliation bill that Congress is considering, they have put $150 million for calendar year 2026 just to do that implementation work.
For the whole country?
Yes. So it's comically low, but it's $150 million going to contractors, right? So there is this suite of private contractors who are going to the states and saying, you have these new things you have to do. You have to change all your systems. You can, give us a $10 million IT contract, and we will go in there and make all of these kind of changes to create the bureaucracy needed.
Okay, so you're telling me there's a group of people who will make money off of this. They are contractors. It's been budgeted for in what the House is talking about, but the budget is ridiculously low because it's less than an individual state spent to do this, and they're budgeting it for the whole country. So that's also kind of a lie. Like, that's not going to be how this plays out.
Yeah, so the amount they have budgeted, right, comes out to like less than $3 million per state. So that's comically low if we look at what the other states have spent to do this. So the broader thing, if you just sort of take a step back and look at what are we doing here? We are spending a lot of money, right? The $150 million or the $270 million in Kentucky were spending a lot of money to build up a whole bunch of bureaucracy to make workers do reporting, to make people with disabilities do reporting, because we think many of them will fail, and that will save us money.
Can we focus in on the Medicaid expansion and why it's so targeted by this big, beautiful bill that's moving through Congress? You said something earlier that I think is probably worth honing in on, which is about the fact that Medicaid has expanded greatly. Like in the early days, Medicaid and welfare were tied together, right? So it was really healthcare for the indigent poor. And now it's not, right?
That's exactly right. At the beginning, 1965, cash assistance and healthcare were considered something kind of extreme that we're going to provide to a very small category of people. And over that time, right, the Medicaid concept expanded so that by the 90s, everybody was thinking very differently about healthcare. And that's why Medicaid was split away from traditional welfare at that time. And more categories were added still until 2010, where the Affordable Care Act creates the Medicaid expansion, which was kind of like crossing the finish line to a marathon. You could look at the Medicaid expansion and say, all right, this isn't a big deal. All the Medicaid expansion does is just create one more new category within the existing framework of categories. But the one category it adds, right, the Medicaid expansion says everyone else who is poor. And so it sort of completed the evolution. It's like 45 years of progress culminating with the Medicaid expansion, laying the whole worthy poor concept to rest. And I think some on the right believe that some poor people are unworthy and they are attacking the Medicaid expansion, and you can see it in the work requirement because they want to resurrect that distinction to separate out some poor people from others, some poor people who they think are to blame for their poverty and who they want to punish for their poverty.
Well, you can hear it just in the language that GOP politicians are using. Like you've got Speaker of the House Mike Johnson talking about Medicaid recipients as young guys just laying around the house playing video games instead of building a career the way he should be. And then, you have Ted Cruz of Texas talking about work requirements for Medicaid on News Nation. He almost seemed to conflate Medicaid with like direct cash assistance.
So what the House has done, which I've been advocating for a long time, is if you're a young, healthy adult, you should be working and you shouldn't be getting Medicaid and sitting at home just getting a government check. Putting a work requirement.
And those two things seem important to me. It really is like demonizing people for accessing health care.
Yeah, so there is a basic fact here, which is that many, many minimum wage workers cannot get health insurance from their job, and they cannot pay the ridiculous price of insurance out of pocket because they're low-wage workers. That set of Republicans who hates the Affordable Care Act and the Medicaid expansion it created, they refuse to acknowledge the reality that very often work does not get low-wage workers health insurance for them and their families, right? That's the bottom line. And the House Republicans hate Medicaid expansion and are going after it through work requirements because they're in denial of the existence of all these people who are working and just can't get health care. It's like these people are invisible to them.
So this bill that's supposed to make these work requirements happen, what is its status right now? Do we even know?
So we know the broad picture of the status, which is that right now House committees are considering the Republican reconciliation bill that would target $880 billion of cuts to the Medicaid program to help pay for the large tax breaks they also have in the bill. This bill failed actually to pass out of the Budget Committee on Friday, but then just last night, so Sunday the 18th at 10 p.m., the House Budget Committee advanced the bill out of committee. No one really knows what promises were made to make that happen.
You're really burning the midnight oil there.
Yeah, and they're going to again. It's going to go next to the Rules Committee. And then it will move to the full House floor. Speaker Johnson's stated goal would be for the full House to vote by Thursday, the 22nd, the last day before the Memorial Day break. And so the takeaway for listeners is that the biggest cut in Medicaid history may literally be days away from passing through the House.
You know, I noticed that one of the things that Congress people seem to be debating over was when work requirements went into effect. You know, in one version of the bill, work requirements for Medicaid weren't supposed to go into effect until 2029, which seemed convenient to me because it's a big delay. So it means your cost savings are delayed, but it also means politically the people who vote in favor of this might be a little protected when 2026 rolls around.
Yeah, you know, it was certainly suspicious that they're implementing this just after the next presidential election. So that certainly leads one to believe that they do understand that people are going to be very upset when, 14 million people lose their health insurance. There are going to be some unhappy voters.
I sort of wonder, listening to you, if the entire United States is about to be like that guy from Georgia, Luke Seaborn, who was like, yeah, work requirements, sounds fine. And then you get into the guts of it and you're like, oh, I didn't think about this.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people who are going to be very surprised when they see what this policy looks like in reality. They talk about it one way, they talk about it on paper, but Luke Seaborn, Adrian McGonigal in Arkansas, these individuals, this thing landed on them like a ton of bricks and made their life a lot worse. And it just doesn't work the way they say it does. And we can see that in every state, because in every state, workers who are not supposed to be getting terminated are getting terminated. That's what this thing does. It takes health insurance away from people.
Leo, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Mary.
Leo Cuello is a research professor at Georgetown's Center for Children and Families. And that's the show. What Next is produced by Paige, Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Ethan Oberman, Isabel, Angell, and Madeline Ducharme. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky. Say hello. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Talk to you later.